Welcome to the second episode of the Advertising Archives. Ainsley and I are back to talk with you about the most valuable beer brand in the world, Corona Extra.
As always, we want to shout out the Breaking and Entering podcast hosted by Gino Schellenberger. Thank you for giving us a platform and a network of podcasters to work with.
And we want to give a little shout out to his Crowbar Awards that he has just come out with. Basically what the Crowbar Awards are, if you're someone that's trying to break in and enter into the advertising industry and you feel like your portfolio is kind of lacking, you can enter the Crowbar Awards. I think the first client that they're doing, the hypothetical client, is Dasani. You try to change the perception of Dasani. Greg Hahn, who is he was the chief creative director. He was like the guy that started the Mischief Agency. So, I mean, you're going to be judged and critiqued by an actual high-profile industry professional. So, just a quick shout out to Gino and his new Crowbar Awards that came out.
If you're interested in competing and building your portfolio, you can find out more information at crowbarawards.com. Also, be the first to know any updates by following at Breaking and Entering Pod on Instagram.
Corona Extra. It's one of Modelo's many imported beers. It is the #1 Mexican beer sold in the world and the #1 imported beer in America.
Corona and Modelo are owned by...
Modelo owns Corona.
Right.
Yeah.
The slogans were constructed in a way that was directed towards the consumer.
I think it's directed through the lens of the consumer. So they say find your beach and Modelo says brewed for those with a fighting spirit. Mm-hmm. I feel like those two taglines are kind of up for interpretation. Whatever your beach is or whatever fighting your spirit is, it's kind of, they kind of let the consumer just kind of drive that path for them, as opposed to we have Michelob and Budweiser and Heineken. Michelob's is it's only worth it if you enjoy it, which is cool because like it's kind of about a light beer. So like it's only worth the low carbs if you enjoy it. So I think, and then like Budweiser, who apparently is their direct competition, their slogan is King of Beers, which that's a cool slogan. I like the way that sounds, but I mean, it's kind of like, so you're saying it's the King of Beers, but I'm drinking it. I don't think it's the King. I don't feel like a king when I drink it.
I feel like it's like the most American beer.
Is it an American beer?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Then there's Heineken too, of course. Okay, so Heineken's is the best beer brewed in a better world, which I've never heard them say that.
Yeah, I've never heard them say that either.
It was kind of like in our last episode, whenever, who was it, like Progressive?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
like it's just one of those slogans that
there's some that like I just don't like. They don't stick, or at least I don't.
I am a fan of Coors though. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies.
Yeah, I like that. And you can like when you look at Coors, like they have like the little mountains on there.
I feel like it's a more visual slogan.
Those are just the slogans that we were kind of wanting to touch on. So now we want to watch. We're gonna hop into actually the Find Your Beach campaign by Corona Extra. Here's the first kind of video that kind of kicks that off. It's you'll see.
Are we doing okay here?
Absolutely.
And what can I get for you?
I'll have one of those.
Now we want to talk about, like we did last time, is what drives brand love. I think last time we did a poor job of kind of explaining that. There's 6 things that drives brand love, but we kind of wanted to explain to you what each thing was. So first thing that drives brand love is consumer brand engagement. This refers to the creation of attachments between consumers and brands. These attachments may be emotional or rational. They produce brand loyalty over time and solidifies the brand, helps them to improve the customer experience. So this is kind of like, when we get into that, we're going to talk about touch points. That's kind of like a physical store or whatever you see on their website or social media. Mm-hmm. We've got consumer brand relationship. That's the relationship that consumers think, feel, and have with a product or a company's brand. Then we've got building trust. I feel like building trust is all about authenticity of your product or brand. Yeah, and the big thing about building trust is with Corona, you're going to see us talk a lot about how they went out and they talked to the actual customer. It's like a unique insight there. Like we never realized how important it is to actually talk to the customers, which is like seems so obvious. But I think a lot of people that try to start brands, they think that because I'm a customer and I've bought things, I know exactly what people are going to want.
Right.
but it's just
good insight.
then we've got customer understanding, which is just, I think that's pretty clear. We talked last time about corporate and social responsibility. This one's going to be kind of more blended with the consumer brand relationship in this episode. But what that is, it's a business model that helps a company be socially accountable to its stakeholders, itself, and to the public. And then last time we talked about nostalgia marketing. This time we want to talk about what it means to change the narrative. For Corona Extra, we wanted to explain what was once Corona's biggest asset and liability, how it kind of became what was Corona's biggest asset, which was that they were a beach beer, how that eventually became their biggest liability because they became one-dimensional, but they were able to break the rules of marketing and switch that narrative. So those are the 6 things that we're going to be touching on for brand love. And then obviously, like with our last episode, we're going to go and talk about some successes they had, missed opportunities, their campaign evolution, and then some insights and some trends that we would have started if we had worked there, or if TikTok was a thing back then.
That was so well explained.
Was it?
Yeah, the
Okay,
last
cool.
part, how you call them one-dimensional, and then really?
You need to keep that in there. I like that. You give me a compliment. Keep that in there.
Okay.
All right. So if you want to take us away with the consumer brand engagement, you got it.
Okay. All right. So with consumer brand engagement, obviously he just explained all of this, but it's just kind of the touch points of where advertisement meets the consumers. For them, they use print ads, commercials, bus advertisements, billboards. One of the bigger things they did was the When You're Beach.
So yeah, the consumers could download on their iPhone or their Android where they could enter their email address at coronawhenyourbeach.com. And then you go to find your code and you could see what prizes you won. And they actually ended up giving like 80 awards out. A total of 80 grand prizes were awarded, from $3,000 gift certificates that were redeemable for any sports travel or tour destination they want to go to. And then they also, like, beers are always doing like promotional things with sports outlets. Mm-hmm. So they did with John Gruden, who's just like a big ESPN analyst and commentator. And they did one where he basically got on and he said, these are my like favorite destinations to go for, I guess, like Super Bowls or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you type in football or whatever, you can have a chance to go, if you're of legal drinking age. Let's preface that.
Well, it's over now. This was in like 2013.
Yeah.
So I don't think
just to be in a good the public eye for Corona.
Don't get any ideas.
Yeah. You could log in and for Corona's Find Your Beach, you could text football, and then you have a chance to win an all-inclusive trip to New Orleans, San Diego, Pittsburgh, Ann Arbor, or Knoxville, which is like, those are all pretty cool places. Although Ann Arbor kind of threw me off. I've never been.
That's the only place on this list that I haven't been.
Yeah. And you've been to San Diego?
Mm-hmm. No, it is my favorite place I've ever been. San Diego.
Could you say that San Diego is almost like your beach?
Good job.
Can it be like that? No, but I mean like the Find Your Beach thing that we're talking about.
For sure.
Like that could be like your little happy place, San Diego. Now we're going to touch on consumer brand relationship. How did Corona achieve this? They did, one, through the whole campaign that we're talking about, the Find Your Beach campaign. Corona Extra wanted to show consumers that a beach is not always made of sand, with the intention to make the brand more open to more people on more occasions. They needed to take back the non-beach occasions, so the campaign evolved from focusing just on beaches to showing how Corona Extra can help transform every day into a vacation. In other words, the objective of the campaign was to get consumers to understand that Corona Extra is a great beer for the summer, but it's also a great beer in the winter because it gives people that beach state of mind. I think that this whole concept is just so flippin' cool.
Genius. All right, and I guess in talking about that, we can also bring up the target audiences. Or I guess there are 2 specific target audiences, which is primarily men 21 to 35 years old with a college education who make $50K a year and identify with the lifestyle Corona represents.
Mm-hmm.
Then their secondary target audience is the U.S. Hispanic population, men again 21 to 35, high school education.
That was under 50K. Then they also achieved it through strategic public relation efforts. This is a big thing for the whole Find Your Beach thing. The whole campaign was how important public relations was. And obviously, we take classes in IMC about public relations, and PR is a big thing. But I never realized how important PR was until I dove into this. So just to like a broad thing, public relations practitioners can build meaningful brand, product, or service differentiation. Did not say that word right.
Say it again.
Different.
Can't you say it?
I can say different. No, I can't say it.
Let me try. Differentiation.
Yeah, differentiation. It's a tongue twister for me. The Corona Extra Find Your Beach campaign is a poster example of basically how good PR can set apart an effective strategy from a not so effective strategy. What is like really significant about PR in the Find Your Beach campaign is the effective communication mix that they did. They did 4 cultural event stages. And if you want to take over on that one, you can.
Oh yeah. So between like March and May, they did Cinco de Mayo, which we love. And then between May and July, they did the Corona Summer, which obviously like Find Your Beach, that's going to be huge. And then August to September, Labor Day. In these like in between these time periods, they're like throwing out advertisements and stuff that reach the audiences.
Well, that's what they're doing. So like the Cinco de Mayo, the Corona Summer,
so
the
like
Labor Day, and the Feliz Navidad.
So they're working up to these days. Right?
Yeah, well, I think what it is like that time period, March to May, the Cinco de Mayo, they have media and digital advertisements that fit the Cinco de Mayo theme. And that's important because of the 2 different target audiences that they had. They had the target audience that was just males, and then they had the Hispanic target audience.
Right.
So Cinco de Mayo is obviously a cultural holiday for Mexicans. Then you've got the Corona Summer, which is for all Americans, and it fits Corona's brand. You got the Labor Day, which is an important holiday for Americans. That's now they've hit both target audiences.
And then we have
Feliz Navidad, which is just a special holiday for every culture.
Merry Christmas.
Seriously.
Have a Corona.
So I think that's where PR really set themselves apart. The Moments, which is a debut TV spot that they had. So it features a montage of scenes with people relaxing with their Corona Extras, but at fresh, unexpected places. So this is like their first attempt at taking the Find Your Beach away from just beach locations. So they did a mountain vista to a big surf clip to a New York City rooftop. The commercial also used a song that perfectly reflects the Corona state of mind, unrestrained by time or pressures, and that perfectly fit with the campaign. And then we're going to play that right now.
Meet me by the sea again. Past the point the shoreline bends, where the sand is soft and warm and hangs upon your golden arm. It's unworn, move it all.
So that song was called Secret Song by Jesse Harris. I thought what was really cool tidbit too was that song was available on Corona's Facebook page, and it was available to purchase on iTunes.
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
So it was kind of like, this is like a really cool campaign that you can relate to, and then if you like it enough, you can go and have this as a ringtone.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, I thought that was really cool. Another thing for brand love is building trust, which is what we talked about. It's all about authenticity. And how did Corona achieve this? Was through brand alignment. Brand alignment, this is the measure of how well your firm fulfills its brand promise to the customer. So I talked about earlier how they went out and they talked to consumers directly about their experience with Corona Extra, how it makes them feel, what they think of when they think of Corona, and why they like drinking it. We'll talk more about this story about Kenny Chesney and what they did, but like a brief little like excerpt about that story was as they went out to like the parking lots when Kenny Chesney, which was like an artist they did a partnership with that like really represents Corona Extra, they would go out into the parking lots and they'd see all these different people drinking different beers, and they'd go up and they'd say, why are they not drinking Corona? So they'd go up to Corona and say, does our Find Your Beach make sense? And it turns out that it did. It did make sense to them. The things for brand alignment that I wanted to touch on was they went out and talked to consumers directly about their experience with Corona Extra. For a long time, the actors in the commercials were regular people instead of celebrities. And you made a good point about that when we were talking about that. You made a good point when we were talking about that a couple of days ago. How you said, I like how they don't use celebrities; they use actors because it's more relatable. You can envision yourself doing that.
Yeah, but that was also, I feel like I read that somewhere where
Yeah.
they did that like specifically so they could picture themselves as the person drinking the beer on the beach or wherever their beach is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that's like really cool. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
always try to like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? They always try to pick like the biggest celebrity, but
Or like they would pick people, celebrities obviously,
Yeah.
but like they would pick people who they would imagine their target audience like looks like or like represents themselves with. But
Mhm.
like with this, you don't have to worry about whether you're advertising to their primary target audience or their secondary target audience because the person that they're advertising to is the person that's watching the video, which
100%.
opens up that kind of scope
Yeah,
way more.
exactly. I think like there was an insight that we had in our last episode in the most engaging commercial that they had. It was called the commercial.
Oh yeah, deepfake.
Deepfake. The dude said that sometimes it's the most simple ideas
Yeah.
that'll get your point across, and they don't try to do anything too much with it. They really use an actor that's just like an average Joe. So what kind of really just takes into conclusion of what we just said and what you said about how they want to align exactly with their consumers. A quote from one of like the head chairs in Corona, they said, "To that end, we would never do a Rolling Stones or other major tour sponsorship just to tag a brand on a tour. It has to be true. It has to be authentic. It has to be connected.
Mhm.
We don't expect our partners to sell a brand." And when he says partners, he was referring to Kenny Chesney or Jimmy Buffett, who totally fit the bill.
completely.
Yeah, 100%. We don't expect our partners to sell our brand for us. We don't put them in commercials or ask them to sell our brand. If it's natural, it'll work, and it'll help us expand our base and reinforce what our message is, what our brand is all about. You can position anything the way you want, but it's the consumer's takeaway that matters.
Right.
It's literally exactly what you were saying earlier.
Find your beach. Right? No. Okay. Corona needs to hire us because we have great ideas.
We do. Okay, here's what we want to talk about. This is going to go kind of off of our outline, but now that you threw a lime at me, that's perfect gateway for what we would do. Dude, it's like so sour at first, and then it like has this like super sweet like finish to it.
I used to only buy lemons, but now I only buy limes, like to put in my water.
Really?
It's just like better.
That was really good. Where do I put this?
Yes, you just have to consume it. I don't know.
I feel like there's a way that you can like put it like right here. I haven't showered today, so we'll just go like I think it's fine. With her throwing a lime at me, this is what we thought. If TikTok was around, for this campaign 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we both thought that what if the way that they do like on TikTok, this is gonna sound weird that I know this, but when like women are doing like those like hauls and they're like about to put on all those clothes that they have and they're wearing like their pajamas and then they like throw the clothes in the air or throw the clothes at themselves and then like they have that like snap feature and then they're like wearing the different clothes. So our thing was like, what if we're outside, whatever your leisure time is, your beach is, you're watching a football game or you're reading a book or
You're in your living room filming a podcast.
wow, yes, seriously. You always say like the coolest things. You're sitting there and you're like, what is missing? Like, why am I not enjoying this to the fullest?
Like throws a line, like find your beach, or like so. I don't know. Hold this cup. Like Adam's sitting there and he's like doing his thing, and then I'm like,
Find your beach. Yeah. So however,
no, but oh, that's what you were gonna say. That when the lime drops into the drink, all of a sudden it pops into a Corona.
yeah, this turns into a Corona and then the background changes into whatever your beach is. And then if you like to watch football, you are then transported to a football game because that is your beach.
Right.
Or if you're chilling out and you're like reading a book or whatever, it's super cold outside and you can't get your logs to catch fire. And you're like, man, I love to watch books, but it's too cold. Yeah, it's too cold. Someone throws a lime at you or at your book and it's like, find your beach.
And
And
so it's a
instantly,
book in your hand.
Yep.
It's a Corona.
yeah, and instantly, boom, you're just in a snuggie.
We need to make that an actual TikTok
Yeah,
ourselves.
We will.
We have to. We must.
We will. I was talking about
TikTok.
yes, and we can make our own little commercial.
But what is our beach? It's not this. It's not this.
I don't know, but like we'll figure that later. But you see what I'm saying now?
Yeah.
We just came up with a fire idea. This was our thing about breaking the rules of marketing. So the rules maintained to sell beer, or that women and sex sell beer. But Corona found its success by identifying and remaining true to a distinctive set of values and a unique brand personality. The brand uncovered a set of values important to its consumers, found a way to communicate those values, and committed to never waver from what makes the communication work. So we talked about nostalgia marketing last time. This time was changing the narrative. And the way they did that was they broke the rules of marketing. They kind of started thinking outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
What was once our biggest asset immediately became our biggest liability.
And can you go deeper into explaining
What that means?
Yeah, because I feel like understanding this point is it allows you to really appreciate what Corona did. Because I mean, from the outside looking in, it kind of just looks like they kept the same slogan and it just started working for them all of a sudden.
Yeah. Okay.
But
so
their downfall, explain that.
Okay, so their biggest asset was that they were known as this relaxing, fun beach beer. But eventually, this asset became their biggest liability because then they were looked at, like I said earlier, as this one-dimensional brand. They were only known for the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of going, okay, we're doing Find Your Beach, we're going to have to change the tagline. And this whole thing about what Corona did was they had to rebrand themselves as not just a beach beer. So the way they did that and taking the liability and turning it back into their biggest asset was that they said, okay, Find Your Beach. We're going to make it a mindset instead of an actual place.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, and it's a beach beer, so if your mindset is the beach, we don't really have to change the setting as more of how we can make the customer interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone was like, okay, it's their liability is that they're just a beach beer. Well, that's because how the way the PR strategies were and how they were going off of their slogan, that's how they were allowing the audience to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
But by using the 4 cultural stages, by the partners they did with Kenny Chesney and all that, and then re-implementing Find Your Beach in a different way, is how they changed that liability to their biggest asset. They said, look, we are still going to say Find Your Beach, but finding your beach doesn't mean you're finding your beach at Seaside or finding your beach at Orange Beach or wherever. Mm-hmm. It's more of a mindset thing.
Right. And so that's how they turned it into, in 2009 when they went negative. Then when they pigeonholed themselves as being just a beach beer, then they went back positive in 2013 once they started implementing, whatever your beach is.
Yeah. So we were talking about sales right there. So it was really cool how they were able to rebuild the brand's image and obtain the targeted sales increase that they were going for. A lot of the times when you're rebranding, I feel like it's almost like a reboot.
Yeah, but also it can be really scary if you're completely changing your identity. It's completely rebuilding your brand. But
I feel like they were able to use it as a springboard. A trampoline. It didn't slow them down. It really just it was a negative that needed to happen. Yeah.
Kind of give them an edge a little bit.
Yeah, literally give them an edge. So that was one of the successes we were wanting to talk about, was how the rebuilding of their brand, they were actually able to increase sales when they were actually starting to plummet in 2009. Then we want to talk about the successes too, which is all we took going to brand love and we talk about what brand love is, but a lot of the things happen during brand love is their successes. Effective public relation campaign strategies was, I think, with the whole 4 culture, going into their cultural aspects and trying to target different people, that was a huge success. And what an effective public relation strategy looks like, if it's executed correctly, it generates a short-term behavior change and builds an emotional connection that creates a profound relationship and ultimately a rational response to a brand and a product purchase. Again, I touched on for successes, their PR efforts, which was centered around presenting the company's appreciation for cultural aspects, reinforcing the company's image as a respected partner for culture. That's actually really cool because I think nowadays, in 2023, being
inclusive.
Yeah, thank you. Inclusivity is so important, and it wasn't really as important 15 years ago, or maybe it was important, but just brands didn't really see it that way. It wasn't in the light like that. But the fact that Corona was able to step on that and make it important,
but also they are an imported beer.
That is also true.
So they're
yeah. I think the insight there is that brands can get so caught up in what's a catchy slogan, how can we make our product look the coolest? How can we target the consumers? When really, when we talk about how Corona lets the consumers lead us down that road by asking the consumers what they like. It's not just about what they like, but it's like how they feel, and not just how the drink makes them feel when they drink it, but like what the brand stands for. When I watch like podcasts, I always like to stand and follow people that have the same morals and same values as me. Someone that I would be like, okay, he has a cool brand. I would be that friend. I would be that person's friend that tells him to build the empire when it's at ground zero, because I believe in his journey. And I think that's what Corona does really well, is like they have a product, but they're trying to say like we're trying to build like a community with Corona. We stand for Hispanic people. We stand for the American people through our product.
Yeah, I like that. Well said.
I feel like that was a whole ramble spiel,
But speaking of like what the product looks like, and you're like, most brands would just like try to make their thing look cool. Corona has.
No, they have.
Because notably, like Corona is one of the only beers that comes in a clear, like glass bottleneck.
So yeah,
And there's a reason that most beers don't have clear bottles. Do you remember what I was
I
saying?
don't know.
Well, because whenever the sunlight hits it, or at least pale lagers, whatever, have like colored bottles, is because it like limits the amount of sunlight that gets in. And because I was researching why they put limes in like Coronas, or like how that got started. Whenever sunlight hits Corona, like chemically turns it into what's in skunk spray.
Yeah.
So it makes it stinky.
Yeah.
But like with the lime, it kind of like takes the smell away.
They're drinking skunk spray.
No, it's not actual stuff. It's like what makes it smell that way. It's just a chemical compound that it transforms into.
I see what you're saying.
And then, do you want to talk about how they like updated their bottles to like?
Oh yeah. So we have a couple other successes, but to go off what she's saying is a cool insight that we found, or not really an insight, more like a tidbit, was after Corona completely rebrands their image through the 100 years, because I think it said Modelo came out in 1925, and they had the 13 beers that they imported. One of them was Corona. So in basically 100 years, Corona never touched the actual bottle until they decided a good connection between Corona is with the limes. It's like a connection right there, but still not a lot of people drink limes with Coronas, or not enough people. So they decided to remind everybody that a lime and a Corona go together by engraving a lime on the neck of the bottle.
Yeah.
Which is really cool, because that was the first time they altered the bottle in like over 100 years. And that's just such like a unique thing. Not only did they engrave lime on the bottle, but that's kind of like creating a new icon for their brand. 100 years later.
And they're really leaning into like something that's super different about Corona that no other beer has.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't want to put fruit in their beer. I think there's a commercial my dad or someone was telling me about like never fruit the beer. Never fruit the beer.
That's a commercial?
Commercial slogan, something like that. Yeah, never fruit the beer. It was like beer. He was talking about it was like beer laws or something like that. But yeah, it was like there was like rules among like how to drink beer. I think it was one like, if you know how what was it, Budweiser that said King of Beers, or so it was kind of like this like manly-ish kind of thing. I think what you said, Corona, is like different. They put lime in their beer. That just kind of made me think of like it's different because you don't usually put fruit in your beer. So there was 3 other things we want to talk about, or 2 other things for successes. Allowing the consumer to lead the way. So Bill Hackett, he was a former chairman for Corona, and he said, Corona, it's a state of mind, it's an attitude. Brands spend their entire lives fighting to find that kind of messaging. It's our consumers that directed us down that path. I'd like to say we're really, really smart, but knock on wood, we were the smartest about letting our consumers lead us down that road. So kind of like back to what I was talking about, how like I like to listen to podcasts or follow people. I like what they stand for. It's really more about what the person behind it. It's all about the message that that person has. So I think Corona, when they do the cultural aspects and they talk about finding your beach and what that means to you, instead of focusing on what does Corona mean, or like when we were looking at the other ones, when it was like the best beers brewed in a better world, Heineken. How can I relate to that?
Yeah, you can't. So like for most beer companies, they're making the company the star of all their advertisements.
Yes.
And for Corona, they flipped it and again, changed the rules, I guess, and made
Yeah.
it more so about who,
Consumers
yeah,
decide.
who's drinking the beer.
So that's what I thought was really cool about this
Yeah.
campaign. And then another thing that was cool, it kind of goes off of that, is always loyal to consumers. Our team worked hard to make sure that whatever we did was well vetted and read true to our consumers. We didn't want to have disconnect. We were overly cautious and maybe even missed some opportunities, but we wanted to make sure that we were connected. And a great example of that is Modelo, who like Corona is like, I guess kind of like it like kind of splits off, since Modelo is like the brand that I guess made Corona, right? Is that how it works?
Modelo made Corona, yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of the 13 brands from Corona's like one of the 13 brands from Modelo. Modelo is the fighting spirit. They're sponsored by the
Mhm.
UFC, and they said that given Corona's positioning,
And again,
they would not want to be represented by the UFC, even though Corona comes
Yeah.
from Modelo.
but at the same time, like even their advertisement being with UFC is very inclusive of everyone, because like all these fighters come from like very
Mhm.
different backgrounds, different
Yeah.
countries.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, it works for them. It just wouldn't work like for Corona specifically.
no.
But yeah, I think that's like a really cool insight.
Yeah.
There's my line fell out. I thought I was wearing a necklace for a second.
Ew.
Oh, those the good lines?
This is a good line.
I just put my slimy line in the.
Those are your lines.
So we've got our missed opportunities. So even though Corona Extra divided the campaign into 4 cultural event stages, and they really made sure that they were targeting the Hispanic community,
Mhm.
none of their commercials were presented in Spanish. They were only presented in English, which is crazy because not everyone's bilingual.
When Adam told me that, I literally did not believe him.
I think one thing that we could probably touch on more in other episodes is the agency that they're with. So they were with Cream of Castle, which is located in Chicago, and they think they hit all the points, and that's just something that they missed.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Maybe that's why. Last thing we've got here is the campaign evolution. Obviously, the biggest part of this campaign's evolution is taking back the non-beach occasions from other competitors. Their biggest asset was that they were a beach beer, but then this led them to being one-dimensional, turning their biggest asset into their biggest liability. To repeat what we said earlier, the campaign evolved from focusing just on beaches to showing how Corona Extra can help transform every day into a vacation. In other words, the objective of the campaign was to get consumers to understand that Corona Extra is great beer for the summer. There's also a great beer in the winter because it gives people that beach state of mind. And I wanted to wrap it up with the 2 quotes that we read earlier, but I just wanted to kind of reinforce it.
Mhm.
The 2 from the Corona executives was, to that end, we would never do a Rolling Stones or other major tour sponsorship just to tag a brand on our tour. It has to be true, it has to be authentic, it has to be connected. Ooh, this is what we wanted to read. Sorry, this is the last thing we wanted to read. Where's that story? Okay, so it was an interview with 2 of these Corona executives. The question they asked was, at the time, you had the capability to promote at concerts, but what did that look like in the mid-'80s with Jimmy Buffett before social media? Bill says it was a natural association. Jimmy was about the beach, and the fans just got it. The way we elevated this was by promoting the partnership in the market via displays and features in both bars. And this last point was always a challenge, as we typically weren't regularly sold at these venues. We'd walk around parking lots where the fans were pre-gaming, and we'd see what they were drinking and ask ourselves, was the alignment working through the purchase habits? It was a granular way to monitor our effort. After all, this was a marketing investment. It's tough to define if you're spending the right amount on the right things. But back to an early lesson, you can always talk to consumers and they will let you know. We immediately got it that it was not a misalignment. Most everyone understood the partnership and said, yeah, that makes sense. And then it goes on to say, you talked about knowing the granular approach and going through parking lots. Tell us, did you research the distribution and notice a difference? And they said, absolutely. We do business with over 500 distributors. We made sure that they were always geared up with promo materials. And then it says, when Corona came on, you guys were still considered a premium sweet beverage, but they were not poured onto the main concourse. When Corona got inside the venues where general consumers could consume this beer, they said, okay, this is the beer that we choose to relax with. We got them to become a beer you could get anywhere in the venue. The sandbar at Kenny's concerts became the Corona Sandbar, where we might have sold 60 cases at the concert. We were selling closer to 700 cases. And then it wraps up this whole story by saying, Kenny's message at every show is that this show is our beach. Every venue is the beach for Kenny and the fans. It was natural that the crowd was focused on Find Your Beach. So that's how we connected their marketing with Kenny's tour marketing.
Brilliant.
yes, I thought that was just a very cool story to wrap up everything we talked about into an actual concert that they sponsored.
Thank you for tuning in to the second episode of the Advertising Archives podcast, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Deuces.
Peace.